do the undead actually work? In the 3.5 edition Dungeons & Dragons sourcebook titled Libris Mortis, the Book of Undead, they do address this question, and I have explained it so many times, I've come up with a pretty good metaphor, so here goes. Imagine a bathtub full of warm water, slowly cooling down. The water itself will be mostly motionless, unless it gets disturbed, say you put your hand in it and swirl it around. You have the energy to do this because you eat plants and meat and make chemical reactions and break down material and produce heat and such. I don't need to explain all that to you. You know what being alive is like. So you are intaking stored energy and liberating it. It bleeds off into the background heat of the bathwater, and eventually, if you go away, the water becomes still, and much later will go cold. A very, very long time later, the water will evaporate as well, and the bath will be dry and empty. But before that, let's say someone pulls the plug out of the bath and the water starts to drain out of it. This doesn't add to the heat in the bath. It's taking away from both heat and the water itself. But it's also creating motion and action in that water. And that, my friends, is negative energy. In order to be an undead creature, a being needs to first have been alive. And now it needs to be some sort of a conduit, a drain pipe, that is consuming the energy of the universe away. In D&D, we say this is the negative energy plane, but it could also be the very end of time, where the universe has experienced what we call heat death. All the stars have long burnt out. They've drifted so far apart, even atoms are so few and far between that it's very rare for them to even encounter one another anymore. Perhaps even they can wear out, who knows? The important thing is it's a hungry, hungry void, and every undead creature is a drain pipe that connects that void to the material plane and all its light, heat, and life. Negative energy can absolutely power motion and action, and it certainly can do it in a reverse way, without needing food, sunlight, water, oxygen, just the direct action of entropy. Undead beings that drain vitality can't store it. If they need it constantly. It's the destruction of it that gives them that power. Every undead creature drains away the life and heat and material of the D&D multiverse by its very existence. If they're not doing that, they're not actually undead. For example, a deceased elf that is kept seemingly alive by the energy from powerful nature entities is still draining energy away. Even if their motives are good, the consequence is still inherently destructive. There are a few ways the connection to the negative energy plane can be formed. It might be a conduit left behind by a god like Yagol, who exists as a god who is moving backward through time itself, somehow. It could be a powerful magical artifact that creates disruptions in space and time. It could be the natural consequence of cosmic physics, wormholes, and so on. In Dungeons & Dragons, these conduits have been around for an extremely long time. Perhaps they've always been there from the very beginning. I will now quote a small part of page 7 from Libris Mortis. Evil acts can resonate in multiple dimensions, opening cracks in reality and letting the blight creep in. A sufficiently heinous act may attract the attention of malicious spirits, bodiless and seeking to house themselves in flesh, especially recently vacated vessels. Some spirits are often little more than the nodes of unquenchable hunger, wishing only to feed. These comprise many of the mindless undead. Sometimes these evil influences also manage to reinvigorate the decaying memories of a body's former host. Thus, some semblance of the original personality and memories remain, though the newly awakened being is invariably twisted by that inhabiting spirit, resulting in an evil, twisted, and intelligent creature. However, this being is not truly inhabited by the spirit of the original creature, which has left to seek its ultimate destiny in the outer planes. This amalgamation is something entirely new. Other times, atrocious deeds call dark, reanimating spirits into the fleshy form of the newly deceased, leaving the original spirit intact. This might happen if the person was already evil, or was tempted to evil in life. This is very much the case with the Mohrg, an undead monster we are about to learn about today. Hello, by the way, my name is AJ Pickett. I make videos about role-playing games. Thanks for joining me. I hope you are enjoying yourself. Plenty more to talk about today, so grab yourself a tasty beverage. We're about to get deeply nerdy. Also, fair warning, this video contains some disturbing topics. Appearing in 3.5 edition's core monster manual, the Mohrg is the result of a truly evil person, spontaneously rising from the grave to continue the sadistic murders they relentlessly performed in life. Only now they do it to feed their continued existence. Unlike some intelligent undead, that merely use the remnants of a person after their soul has departed their body. The Mohrg actually is the original soul of a person, willfully residing in a horrific physical form. I'll be talking about their appearance, the game statistics for 5th edition, the spontaneous appearance of them, and also a way that they can be created with very powerful necromantic magic. Also of interest because it demonstrates a way that the limitations on magic on the world of Toril can be bypassed, essentially a method to avoid the attention of the gods and unleash despicable terror. According to the FBI, a serial killer is someone who commits at least 3 murders over more than a month with an emotional cooling off period in between. Their premeditated murders are driven by abnormal psychological gratification. This is not just sexual gratification. It can also be motivated by anger, thrill-seeking, financial gain, and attention-seeking. In the case of individuals who become Mohrgs, they may also be mass murderers or spree killers. There's a lot of overlap between these classifications, really. What they typically are not are contract killers. So, for example, an individual who seduces and marries a wealthy person, then murders them and takes all their money, moving on to the next victim, is not a contract killer. The wealth is a motive, but so is the act of murder itself. In the case of a spree killer, there's just a lack of a cooling off period between the murders. Their motivations are largely the same. Now, I'm not going to go into all of these things that serial killers may do to their victims. We get enough of these horror stories in the media as it is. So all I need to tell you is that the Mohrg is very likely given the opportunity to do these same things to the victim if they can. If they can't, then the default killing method of the Mohrg is simply represented in the stat block for the monster in the game. But oh my word, can they be so much worse? And please forgive me, but I'm going to talk about that in this video as well. The Revenant, the Wight, the Lich, and the Mohrg are all intelligent undead. They retain their soul. The Wight, I think, has the most similarity in game's mechanics. The Lich is far more powerful because they are just pouring energy through them into the negative energy plane. They are generators of a lot of negative power. The Mohrg is somewhere between the Wight and the Lich in its connection to the negative plane. This results in a really quite revolting characteristic physical trait common to all Mohrgs. Anyway, when such killers are brought to justice and publicly executed for their heinous crimes, or they otherwise meet a grim end to their life, the body begins to decompose as per usual. It might be almost completely rotted down to infested bones and scraps of flesh. It may be a corpse that was found and dug up by the necromancer, or fished out of a sewer water-soaked ditch on the side of the road outside the city. The state of the body has little to do with what happens next. As the soul of the Mohrg clings to the material plane, lingering near the corpse in the border ethereal plane, fighting with every bit of its will to avoid the horrible fate the afterlife has in store for it. Some crack born of its atrocities in life exists within that corpse, and it latches onto it desperately. Slowly it accumulates more and more negative power. Those pausing near the grave may be able to feel it, a coldness in the air. Animals will shy away from there. It has a disturbing vibe. As the negative energy grows, it feeds what wizards call entropic animancy into the corpse. The internal organs, the viscera, begins to slowly swell and takes on an unnatural vitality. Although some Mohrg's appearances may vary with respect to other details, nearly all specimens can be described as humanoid skeletons with grotesque purple loops of intestine growing within their torsos, winding up and out of their mouths like twisting clawed tongues. Occupying the space where the digestive system once resided, these innards occasionally writhe and pulse with a hunger for nearby life, but otherwise serve no function. A Mohrg may look as though some oddly shaped purple creature has animated a skeleton as a means of locomotion, but the Mohrg's limbs and organs are all integral to its unlife. Mohrgs do not begin their undeath in the forms they come to possess. At the time of its initial animation, a Mohrg has whatever flesh remains on its corpse, which continues to rot and disintegrate from its skeletal frame as time passes. As negative energy suffuses the Mohrg, its entrails, which regenerate if they've been removed, become a bloated purple mass stretching up inside the body and extending out through the jaw. Over time, this once living flesh falls away and the Mohrg is left with nothing but a skeleton wrapped in twining and swollen purple tendrils. This glistening flesh is as ravenously and endlessly hungry as the negative force which animates it, and any contact that the body makes with a living creature will immediately cause a shock of drained heat and vitality. The Mohrg gains nothing from this draining, it merely flows through it and into the endless void. For the Mohrg, its existence is nothing but hunger for death and decay. It's only by feeding the void within it that it maintains the flow of negative force which animates it and gives it the semblance of life. The longer it takes in between killing something else, the longer all it can feel is the hunger for days, weeks, months, years, centuries. Unless destroyed, potentially, it is doomed to this torment forever. Its only brief reprieve is acts of murder, where for a split second, that conduit within it is being fed. Facing off against one of these things, it's easy to mistake them at first just for another zombie or skeleton. But they do move at 30 feet per round. There's clearly something absolutely cranking these things. The 5th edition Mohrg is medium-sized with an armor class of 16, totally immune to poison, exhaustion, or being frightened, resistant to necrotic, bludgeoning, piercing, and slashing from non-magical attacks that aren't silvered, 60-foot dark vision, passive perception of 13, and having 14d8 plus 28, or between 42 and 140, with an average of 91 hit points. They have a strength of 21, dexterity is 19, constitution is 14, and their mental stats are the same as an average living person. Let that 19 dexterity sink in for a moment. This applies to stealth checks, ranged attack rolls, and lock-picking skills for the Mohrg. It retains most of its memories from when it was alive, so it's quite possible the Mohrg could have class levels as a rogue or something else. Imagine watching a group of zombies moving and then they stop. One of them steps forward, bends down, and easily disables a trap. That is fairly spooky. They are +4 to active perception and +7 to stealth checks. Mohrgs prefer the cover of darkness and making ambush attacks. They don't suffer any penalties from being exposed to bright sunlight, though. In combat, they attempt to ambush and lash out with their tongue, also slamming with their fists and attempting to grab a victim. The tongue is +6 to hit a single target within 5 feet of the Mohrg, inflicting 1d4 +5 piercing damage, and the target must succeed on a DC 14 Constitution saving throw or be paralyzed for 5 rounds. The victim can repeat the save at the end of each of its turns. On a successful save, the effect ends, but this does not convey any immunity to further paralysis from this or any other Mohrg. The Mohrg also makes 2 slam attacks each round, +8 to hit one adjacent target. This will take 2d8 +5 bludgeoning damage, plus an extra 2d8 necrotic damage. The slam attacks can also be against 2 different targets. If the Mohrg manages to kill a humanoid, its victim's body will rise as a zombie under the control of the Mohrg within the next 24 hours, and the Mohrg can control up to 12 of these zombies at any one time. Mohrg-spawned zombies have the distinct trait of being faster on foot than other zombies, moving at 30 feet per round rather than the usual 20 feet, so these things can run at you. Mohrg are known to gather in groups of up to 4, with a small force of zombies travelling with them. They are clever, driven, and extremely dangerous. Unlike the soul of a Bodak, a Mohrg can be returned to life using resurrection magic of sufficient power. They remember what it was like to be alive, and they want to live again. Being undead is a very, very unpleasant existence. A Mohrg can never feel breath in its lungs, it can never taste food or wine again, nor can it ever sleep. Their body feels barely any sensation, and yet their soul feels terrible pain. But it's not physical pain. Because they retain their memory, they will most likely mimic the same sort of patterns of behavior, particularly if they were serial killers in life. Something that authorities who had to catch and execute them will be very wary to look out for if there is no means or opportunity to ensure the corpse would not rise again. So by use of sanctifying clerical rituals and burial in holy ground, or often simply dismembering and beheading the body, will do just fine. But it pays to be cautious. Once a Mohrg is within hunting reach of a population, it will infiltrate, kill some victims, then establish a grim little lair somewhere where it can drag back victims, turning them into zombies, which the Mohrg will order to go out and bring back more victims to its harvest. A village whose people keep vanishing only to reappear days later as mindless walking dead can be a far more compelling setting for part of your campaign than simply a cave filled with undead enemies. Likewise, the killing off of the poor of a dock district or the sudden disappearance of beggars from the street near a palace might indicate that a once wealthy noble or mortal has been transformed into a Mohrg and is cleaning his city of the two-legged vermin. Whatever the case, it's important to remember that Mohrgs are smart and should be played accordingly in combat. They know when to stand their ground and when to run, and do their best to strike them when their enemies are weakest. Mohrgs will literally pile zombies onto player characters. They don't care about zombies at all. They're just tools. Zombies are completely mindless and obey anything the Mohrg tells them to do. If the Mohrg decides to terrorize a family by sending their zombified children to stand outside their home, tearing each other's skin and flesh off until they're little bit shambling skeletons remaining, just to draw out the screaming parents, that's exactly what they will do. They are very, very evil. In the Pathfinder RPG, there are some variant Mohrgs that are modified based on the way those evil killers were executed, or the environment in which they died. One of the worst is the Mohrg Mother, a woman who died while pregnant and rose again. An unborn undead infant clings to the exposed entrails for some reason. This empowers this particularly rare abomination to transform one of its victims into another Mohrg instead of into a simple zombie, which has the potential to turn into a complete nightmare if this woman was a serial killer of other pregnant women while she was alive. Frost Mohrgs die by freezing. Desert Mohrgs die by exposure to arid conditions and extreme heat, typically by being buried up to their neck in sand. They have an appearance that reflects desiccation and heat or cold. The Desert Mohrg can raise its victims as burning skeletons rather than zombies, and the blackened frostbitten Mohrgs inflict additional supernatural cold with all their attacks but are otherwise normal. Finally, the Fleshwalker Mohrg is one who was killed via poison and had their body preserved magically with a gentle repose spell. This is particularly common with nobles. They rise again looking quite fresh. Only up close can you tell that they are in fact dead, as they don't breathe and smell a bit like rotting meat. When they attack, though, that revolting nightmare of a tongue disgorges out of that mouth, revealing the truth of what they are. It is noted that those who have studied the Mohrg in some detail have seen that the Mohrg can feel some sort of a rush when one of their victims rises again as an undead monster. The Mohrg speech quickens, it becomes recklessly aggressive, as though under the influence of some sort of narcotic for a short while. Now, it is technically possible to deliberately create a Mohrg. Aside from the methods of execution that might just happen to spawn a Mohrg anyway, the Create Undead spell can accomplish it. However, it's not possible to do this on the planet Toril due to the limitations of magic over 9th level. But there are ways to momentarily step off the planet for long enough to cast the spell somewhere else, be it a parallel dimension such as the Feywild or Shadowfell, out in the orbit of wild space, or through a planar portal linked to another plane of existence. There is nothing stopping a very powerful spellcaster from using a legendary spell over 9th level and some combination of portal magic to have it affect the planet Toril. As much as that will undoubtedly royally piss off the goddess of magic, she probably won't bother getting involved if the result is just the creation of a Mohrg. As horrible as that is, it's not as dramatic as causing a volcano to erupt in the middle of a city, even if, eventually, the Mohrg could kill just as many people. Speaking of Toril, you can be unfortunate enough to encounter lone wandering Mohrg in the regions of Chanith Vale, Dambrath and Val Dawn, as well as almost anywhere in the Underdark. Thanks for joining me in this exploration of the vile Mohrg. I pity your players, but do tell them I say hi. Meanwhile, hit the like and subscribe button and notification bell if you like what I do. We're your geek with pride, and I'll be back, as always, with more for you very soon. Man, the YouTube algorithm is going to absolutely love this video. Serial killers and FBI and all sorts of buzzwords. One thing I should have mentioned is the reason why the Mohrg lingers outside in the border ethereal plane as negative energy builds in its corpse is because it needs to latch on to an entity coming from the other side, from the negative energy plane, where it's attracted to the desperate evil of the Mohrg, its desire to carry on killing. So they become a symbiotic undead organism.